Great, thanks very much. Thank you for the invite. It's a long time since I've spoken here. The last time I spoke here, I was getting married. I had my reception downstairs. So, yeah. I'm going to make a different set of remarks this afternoon, you'll be pleased to hear. And it's very timely. This is a very timely conversation for us. We're going into a very, very fertile period of Labour policy making over the next 4 or 5 months, so very much looking forward to the conversation. I just want to say, if you don't mind, a word about politics, a word about economics, and a word about policy, if that's okay. So the reason that this conversation is so important is it is going to be absolutely at the core of what I hope all political parties will talk about over the next 6 or 7 months. The next election will be dominated by one number in particular, £1,600, which is how much worse a family is worse off compared to 2010. So what that means is that for all of the advances in productivity and growth and technology that we've had over the last 10 to 15 years, basically for all of that change, families are now earning today what they did at the turn of the century. And that's why they're kind of pissed off. And what politicians of all stripes have got to do at the next election is basically give the people of our country not just a story about anger, but a story about optimism. How can we confront the future and tell a story about how Britain can actually win in that world that is fast taking shape around us? It's the kind of story that we actually told 50 years ago in this country, that moment when Harold Wilson went into the 1964 election. Key to his political sizzle was the story that he told at Scarborough in 1963, the story about the future, the story about change, the way that production was changed, the way that working was changed, the way that jobs were going to change, the way in which, as he put it, old-style practices on both sides of industry and labour would have to change in the years to come. But it was an optimistic story, and the policy agenda that followed changed this country and helped people like my parents scramble into the middle class for the first time. That kind of optimism, that kind of forensic plan is basically the political challenge that we've all got. And the crisis in the cost of living masks this profound problem in economics that we confront. The 20% productivity gap that Britain now confronts with the rest of the G7. So what the rest of the G7 finishes making on a Thursday night takes us until the end of Friday to get done. There isn't a way in which we can raise living standards in our country unless we fix that gap. And so what it means is, from the Labour point of view, is that we need to go into the next election with a bold, ambitious account for how we build a bigger knowledge economy. So the knowledge economy in Britain is about 1/3 of GDP, it's about 1/3 of businesses, it's about 19% of jobs. Now, if it was 1/3 of jobs, there'd be 2.4 million extra high-skilled jobs in our country. Now, what's that worth? Well, look, on average, a job in the knowledge economy is worth about £161 extra a week. That's a 40% pay rise for most people. And I guarantee you, if I put a 40% pay rise on the table in front of you, if you weren't a member of Parliament, you'd probably take it. So that is basically the story we've got to tell, just as we did back in the 1960s. It's got to be optimistic, it's got to be positive, it's got to show how we can win. That is the only way you beat the narrow nationalism of parties like UKIP and parties like the SNP. UKIP voters have got one thing in common. They are deeply pessimistic about the future. In fact, 50% of UKIP voters think that the future will be worse than the past. If you want people to vote for progressive parties of solidarity and community like the Labour Party, you need people to feel ambitious, optimistic and comfortable about their prospects in the years to come. So for us, what that takes us to is a policy agenda which we often kind of put under 3 or 4 headings: ideas, people, money and infrastructure. And I'm just going to say a word about each very quickly, and maybe we can get into some of this with questions, but it's the ideas bit that I want to major on, because at the core of innovation policy has got to be some quite big shifts over the next 5 to 10 years. And there's a bunch of things that need to happen on the demand side, and there's a bunch of things that need to happen on the supply side. So on the demand side, government can make a difference by changing the way that it structures demand. So if you take the NHS, for example, we're about to move into a revolutionary set of changes around personalised healthcare. the NHS has to be at the absolute lead in delivering that kind of revolution. The promise that we made at conference to decarbonise the economy has got profound implications for the way that demand side on the energy market begins to change, driving through innovation in a completely new way. If you look at the challenge that public services have got to confront, they've got to confront a situation where standards need to go up while budgets are going down. The only way that you can square that circle is through innovation, through letting go, through doing things differently, through giving public servants some space to do things in novel and innovative ways. So on the demand side, I'm very confident that a good strategy for government can help make our country a more innovative place to work. On the supply side, there've got to be 2 or 3 big shifts as well. And you can kind of characterize the supply side shifts by a grand new kind of fusion. On the one hand, you've got to better connect our country with advances in global science and technology. Actually, globally, innovation spending isn't going down, it's going up. You've got the top 1,000 R&D companies raising spending by about 6%. You've got countries like China growing at, 36% a year. You know, globally, R&D spending is going up, and what we have to do is ensure that Britain is growing its share of that global R&D budget. What that will mean for lots of public policy is becoming a better home for the 1,400 companies that now control half of global R&D. We need to be thinking very carefully about how we ensure those companies have got big global hubs here in our country, often based around innovation ecosystems that have got universities at their core. Second, we need our universities and colleges in partnership to become much more effective power stations for the regional knowledge economy. We need to be kind of wiring together university and regional economic strategy in a completely new way. And the third space, which is going to be kind of far messier and unpredictable, is something that James is going to say more about over the next few months, which is the great potential of citizen-driven science and strategic science over the next 5 to 10 years. We've been very surprised at the radicalism of the feedback we've had to our science green paper before the summer. But one of the themes that has really come out is the appetite to do multidisciplinary work in a completely different way. So people are kind of saying to us, look, scientific breakthrough, very important, we're good at that stuff, need to spend more money on it, but actually if change is to have if we're to really effect change, if science is to have a real breakthrough, it's got to be, deliver change that is actually put into effect. And so the fusion between social science and science, I think, will be one of the big challenges around research funding that we need to drive through. And one of the things we're studying quite closely are both academic research projects but also commercial research projects that are drawing citizens into science in a completely new way. I watch my kids at school, the way that they're involved in science competitions. I look at the way that a number of learned societies are now running all kinds of challenges in a completely different way. They're drawing on our ability now to data capture in a completely new way and draw citizens into the science and research equation. And actually, for me, and you'll forgive me kind of saying this as a kind of member of Parliament from Birmingham, it kind of reminds me of a wonderful book by Jenny Uglow about the Lunar Society that was published a couple of years ago, which was about how, technologists, scientists, interested citizens did used to come together in quite innovative ways back in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. I think we're on the cusp of something almost as exciting. So, around that basic set of ideas, I think there's got to be some policy change. You've got to kind of underpin it with some different strategy and policy on developing people, crucially opening a vocational route to degree-level skills in a way that we don't have in this country. You've got to underpin that with, I think, some new approaches to innovation finance. We might get into this in the discussion. One of the things we're looking at very hard is not just the opportunity for doing things jointly with new, big governments like China. We're also looking very hard at what is going on in great spaces like Silicon Valley and Israel at the moment. Very pleased the chief scientist from Israel is coming over shortly to help us with some of this thinking. And then finally, you've obviously got to sit this on some more substantial infrastructure that is just planned, developed and delivered in a much more long-term and low-risk way. And that includes digital infrastructure, but it includes a lot of other infrastructure too. So, in conclusion, I would say there isn't another way that our economy gets out the rut it's in at the moment. It's crucial not just to the future of our economy, but to the future of our politics. But what's most exciting is that we are on the cusp, I think, of one of the most extraordinary eras in science. And so for those of us who care and love this field of policy work, we should be really working hard to make sure it's front and centre of the debate we're going to have in the run-up to the next election, not just for the Labour Party, of course we hope to lead, but it's something that you should be asking of all political parties. I'll stop there.